I thank everyone for tuning in this morning. On the program today is a legendary, astounding guitarist, co-founder of one of the top four most influential rock bands of all time, Starz. We welcome in Richie Ranno. Richie, Brian C., thanks for being here.
Nice to be here. KMET, cool. Brings back good memories for me.
Honor to have you, Richie. I want to start, Richie. You were born in the Bronx, grew up in Jersey. And for you, watching the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show in '64, that's really what drew you into music and the guitar. Is that correct?
It didn't draw me into music. No. I was always a music fanatic from the time I could breathe. I played like a silly little piano all the time when I was young. Then I played the clarinet, and I got bored. It was it's a crappy instrument. That's what it is. But at any rate, I kind of slowed down on the clarinet by the time I was a teenager, and the Beatles showed up on Ed Sullivan, and I was like, oh, that's the instrument I got to play. That's it. They were so amazing, so different, and had such an impact on my entire generation. And that's it. I became a guitar player, and I learned to play in 3 months enough that I could be in a band, and I just kept going from there.
So you talk about the first band which you joined.
The first band that I ever joined?
Very first band.
It was, we put a trio together. It was a bass player, but he was really playing the bass on a guitar because he didn't have the money for a bass, and he was just playing the low notes, and then a drummer, and we called ourselves the Mystics.
The Mystics?
Yeah, I'll never forget. I'm sure that was taken by a famous group, but we were just in junior high school.
All right, so the Mystics were your first band. Then you fast forward to 1973 when you joined the group Stories. Talk a little bit about Stories. How did you find out they needed a guitar player? How did you join that group?
Well, it's funny how things happen by such crazy chance, but you do have to be ready at all times, because if you're not ready, it doesn't matter what the chance is. So I was living in Wisconsin for 3 years. I just went out on a lark, drove out there with couple of guys who heard me play in Manhattan, and it was a pretty crazy thing to do at the time, but I did it, and I went out there and I put a band together with those guys that lasted about 2-3 weeks, and I quit right away and started a whole new band that did really, really well out in Wisconsin, and we wound up in Madison for a couple of more years there. So it was 3 years total. Then we came back, we played the East Coast. We got these gigs in Florida, Maryland, and Boston. And in Maryland, we played in Ocean City. It's a resort kind of town. And we got to hang out with all these other bands that we were playing with. And Stories was one of them that was playing, but we didn't hang out with them. We just heard them. And when it was all over, I decided to quit and not go back to Wisconsin. And I came back to Teaneck, New Jersey, which is where I'm from. And I said, I got to do something. So I called these people I had met in Ocean City, and they said, come on down, hang out with us where we live outside of Washington, D.C. We'll put a band together. So I did. I went down there, hanging out for about 3 or 4 weeks, and I'm staying at a lady's house who worked for one of these guys in a separate business. I don't remember what the business was. And she was very nice and had extra rooms and just put me up in one of the rooms. And she was at work. The phone rang. I answered it. So always answer the phone, I learned from this. And it was this lady's best friend who she grew up with. And she said, well, what are you doing at Joan's house? And I said, she's kind enough to put me up while I try to put a band together down here with some of her friends. And so the lady, we talked for a while. She said, so what instrument do you play? I said, I'm a guitar player. Well, we had talked for a while by the time we got to that point. And she said, are you good? I said, yeah, I'm pretty good. So she said, well, my husband is the booking agent for the group Stories, and they have a #1 record right now, Brother Louie.
Yes,
I said, yes. I said, I saw them play maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. She said, well, the guitar player just quit. So they're holding auditions in 3 days. Do you want to audition? I said, sure, why not? So she said, here's my husband's direct line at the agency that he works. He's worked at probably the biggest agency for major rock groups in New York City. So I called him up, and she said, tell him I told you. I said, okay. So he set me up with a spot. All the guitar players were going to meet at one time at this studio in Manhattan on Monday. This was a Friday. I got my ass back to New York, New Jersey, bought the album, learned a few songs. And I guess there were about 18. I think there were 18 guitar players. and I got the gig. And
Yeah,
next,
and I read there was about 20 guitarists who auditioned for the position.
yeah. Well, we were all there at the same time, so we all got to
Oh,
hear each other. And in fact, there was a group called Estus, Estus. They had an album out in Columbia, and the drummer was Mark Bell, who later became Marky Ramone. And
yes.
that was one of the groups we were doing gigs with down there in Ocean City. And they had the guitarist from that group was there to audition. And he said, we had gotten to be pretty friendly down in Maryland playing together a lot. And he went up to Ian Lloyd, the singer, and he said, I'm not going to play. Richie Ranno is here. He's the guy for you. And he left. So I'll never forget that. In fact, I haven't even thought about that in many, many years. But when I'm, thinking back, I remember him doing that, which was really like a nice thing. Never saw that guy again either. I don't know what happened to him, but he was from Tennessee. You look up Estus, Estus, maybe you'd find him. But at any rate, I did get the gig. And it was great. It was a great gig.
Now, in '75, you auditioned for a group, Fallen Angels. That was a group managed by Kiss. Is that
Well,
correct? And you landed that role.
yeah, that was another interesting, bizarre thing. In 1973, after joining Stories, we recorded 2 more singles right away. And the producers were Kenny Kerner and Richie Wise, who had produced Gladys Knight and Stories. And they had just produced a new album by a new group. And when I was sitting there recording guitar tracks, Richie Wise held the album up in my face, said, "This is my new group I just produced." And I said, "I don't even understand what that is." It was a picture of 4 guys with makeup on. Well, I didn't know it was makeup. I thought it was a cartoon. And he explained to me, no, they paint their faces. And I was like, well, why would they do that? What group is this? he said, they're called Kiss. And I said, oh, okay. I said, what kind of music is it? And he said, it's hard rock and it's really good. And he knew that I was like into Bad Company, Led Zeppelin, I was Sweet, Slade. Those are my favorite groups at the time. Aerosmith. And so, actually not Aerosmith. Aerosmith I didn't like till the Get Your Wings album. That was 74. So anyway, I said, well, I like that kind of music. He goes, here, take my copy. It'll be out in 2 or 3 weeks. This is an advance copy. So I took it, and I loved it. And I just thought that first Kiss album was fantastic. So on the road, we were touring, and we ended up at the Ramada Inn on Sunset Strip playing the Whiskey for a week and staying in the hotel where the guys in Kiss, it's a small little hotel. And so we hung out with them every day, and they came to see us at the Whiskey. And Gene said to me, you should quit this band and start a new hard rock band because you're a hard rock guitar player. And Bill O'Coin is looking for a second group. I said, yeah, no, thank you. I'm not quitting this band. So now the band broke up, and now fast forward, it's 1975, and I'm trying to get a band together so I could bring it to Bill O'Coin. It's called Rock Steady Management. But I couldn't find any guys that played hard rock in New York City. It's weird, but it was true. And I was just trying different things. I actually almost joined Al Stewart's band. I was asked to join Al Stewart's band at that point. But his guitar player didn't want to take the trip over crossing the pond on a plane. He was kind of scared to do it. Tim Renwick, famous guy, actually. And so they found me through that same agent, and I was going to do it, and then last minute he took the flight, so I didn't get that. So my roadie from Stories, who was my close friend, Tom Butler, lived in the city. I lived in Jersey. He used to read the Village Voice every day, and the Village Voice had classified some musicians, and he called me up and said, take this number down. Rock Steady Management is looking for a guitar player for their new band that they have. This is right up your alley. Call the number right now. So I called the number. There were 75 guitar players that had pretty much had auditioned. There were still 5 more the day that I went. They couldn't find one guy who could play hard rock the way they wanted it to be played. Until I it's a very funny audition that happened, that took place. When I called that number, this guy answered the phone, and he said, are you the greatest guitar player that ever lived? And I said, well, probably not. He said, well, then we don't need you. I said, okay. Normally I would have just hung the phone up, but because it was Rock Steady Management, I just held on, and I just listened to him, and he said, we already have the greatest guitar player that ever lived. I said, well, then you're right. You don't need me. He goes, we need two of them. I said,
Wow.
okay, okay. I said, all right. So I got the information, and I thought the guy was pretty obnoxious. But it was Sean Delaney. He's also a very famous guy, instrumental in Kiss's career and Starz, and he became a very good friend. He was a great guy. And I brought my girlfriend with me, this beautiful blonde, which was not really a smart thing to do, but I just did it. I said to her, "This guy pisses me off."
A beautiful blonde from Jersey, right?
No, she was from Wisconsin, and she was living with me in New Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah, one of those beautiful Swedish blondes from Wisconsin. So it wasn't a professional thing to do, but I said to her, "This guy pissed me off so much. I don't really want to go. Just come and keep me company," because we had to drive half an hour or whatever. And then he said, "No girls are allowed in here." I said, "What the hell are you talking about? Get out of here, you jerk." So I don't know. They rushed her off to some corner of the place, and then when it was my turn to play, the guys didn't even look at me or face me or anything. The other guitar player, Brendan, he pointed to the ground. He said, "Your cable's over there." I thought, "Oh Christ, these guys are a bunch of jerks." And I constantly wanted to leave, and I said, "All right." I plugged it in, and then the guitar player started to count off a song. And I said, "You want to tell me the name of the song or maybe the key or something?" He goes, "Oh, Key of A." I said, "Oh, Christ, I got to get out of here." But so they start to play, and I'm listening, and it kind of had a mountainish feel, the song they started with, and I thought, "Oh, okay, that's easy enough." And I just played along. And they played maybe a minute and a half, is all I think it was. And they stopped. The drummer put his sticks down, that was Joe Doobie, and they looked. Now they were all looking at me. And I just stood there, and they said, "So what's your name?" I told them my name, and they said, "You played with anybody before?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I was in Stories." And they said, "Wow, we were in The Looking Glass."
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, Brandy, number
right?
one.
Brandy.
Well, and the odd thing is, Brandy went to number one in August of '72, and Brother Louie went to number one in August of '73. So there was a lot of parallels between the two groups. And so they said, "Wow, that's cool. Anyway, that sounded great." One of the guys goes, "Let's play another song." So they played another song. And, as I recall, they didn't even talk amongst each other. They just said, "So you want to be in the band?" And I said, "Yeah, that's what I came here for." And the rest is history. So
we're talking with the legendary guitarist Richie Ranno. So Richie, let's talk about Starz. Now, is it a fact that when the name Fallen Angels converted to Starz, is that how it worked out?
Yes, I auditioned actually technically for a group called the Fallen Angels. They had morphed from Looking Glass. They had changed a few members around, including the singer, and became the Fallen Angels and recorded an album for Arista. 2 singles came out that charted low, and Clive Davis, the owner of Arista, said, "The singles weren't a hit, so I'm not releasing the album." And the group had a clause that said they could get out of the contract 6 months after the album was recorded if it didn't come out, so they opted out. They hooked up with Bill O'Coin and Rocksteady Management. And Kiss, by the way, wasn't real big yet, Alive wasn't out. Kiss Alive wasn't out yet. And so now they were looking, Sean Delaney was working with them, and they had a keyboard player, and I think Sean, in the back of his mind, wanted that keyboard player out. Didn't really fit into a hard rock format, and he definitely wanted to have 2 guitar players in the band. So he convinced them to audition for a second guitar player. And then, after about 6 weeks of Fallen Angels, looked like, we were doing really well right away, like right out of the box. We did a few gigs. We opened for Kiss in Philly and did a bunch of gigs, and it was going over well. And they said, you got to change your name because there's a new group called Angel, and there's another group called Angel City, and then there was another group called Angel something or other. So we changed it to Starz with a Z.
Amazing. Now also talk about how important American record producer Jack Douglas was to you and the band. And for those who don't know, Jack Douglas worked with John Lennon, Yoko Ono, Patti Smith, Cheap Trick, New York Dolls, etc. He was a big part of your career, huh?
Well, definitely. You left out the one group that was the most important, Aerosmith.
Aerosmith, okay.
So what happened was, I was the kind of guy that whenever I heard an album that I liked, and I bought every album. I mean, I was a music fanatic, still am, and I would always, like, if I really liked the record, I would look to see who the producer was, who the engineer was, and the studio, and it just logged all this information in my brain. So Jack Douglas produced "Get Your Wings," but he didn't produce the first Aerosmith album. And I know there are people who like that album, so not that I'm trying to offend anyone, but I thought it was a pile of crap other than Dream On. I thought Dream On was great, but the rest of the album just sounded like, to me, it sounded like it was recorded in a submarine 100 yards below the sea, and then you had to listen from up top. It just sounded awful. So Get Your Wings comes out, and it becomes instantly my favorite album of 1974. Although I did love that Kiss album that came out in '74, and I love Desolation Boulevard, sweet. So, but that was my favorite. The sound was amazing, and I thought the producer must be a genius to have this group go from that first album, such a different sound and great sound on the second album. So we finally got our record deal, early 1976. Well, finally, it was only like 3 or 4 months after I was in the band. We got a record deal with Capitol, and Capitol gave us a huge recording budget and touring budget. So Bill O'Coin sat us down and said, "Anybody got any ideas for a producer?" I said, "Yes, Jack Douglas." And of course, no one knew who he was, but we researched it. It turned out he lived in New Jersey. And he came to see us play and loved us, and he and I hit it off best of friends right away, still to this day. And Jack was an amazing producer, and Jay Messina was an amazing engineer who he used, and we recorded at probably one of the top 3 or 4 recording studios in the history of the world, the Record Plant in New York City. And those albums came out great.
Yeah, and in '76, it was the self-titled debut album, Juxtaposed, which had radio-friendly anthems like Detroit Girls and Fallen Angel, right? That was a big-time hit for the radio stations.
Yeah, definitely. You know, a lot of people don't remember us, and we didn't transcend into future generations because we split up in 1980, and also around 1980 is when there was a format, I think it was called Classic Rock Radio or something, and we never got into that. The guy who ran that program, I won't mention his name, but obviously he had it in for us. In fact, I told Doug Broad, who wrote the book, about us, about that. And Doug went and interviewed this guy, and the guy said, "Oh, no, I had nothing against him, but he's full of crap." Obviously, he did. He put much lesser bands into classic rock format and kind of rewrote classic rock history through his own vision, you know?
Yeah, I mean, from '76 to '79 with Capitol Records, Richie. I mean, the band had over a half a dozen hit singles back then.
Yeah. I mean, you know, they weren't top 10, but they were certainly hits around the country, definitely. You know, number one in lots of cities, and we were doing tremendous on the concert circuit, and we were headlining large clubs and theaters and opening or being on the bill for arenas and stadiums for the whole time, that whole run, you know. So we were playing for millions of people and going over like crazy everywhere we played. So the impact was on the next generation was amazing. That, you know, we didn't even realize what we were doing. But when you hear from John Bon Jovi and Sebastian Bach and Nikki Sixx and Lars Ulrich, and the list goes on, Slash and Steven Adler from Guns N' Roses, and they tell you, "We were in the audience. You did it for us. You changed us." And they all tell me, you know. So it's a pretty cool feeling.
Yeah, no, I mean, no question about it. And then '77, the second album was produced, of Violation, and it had that hit song, Cherry Baby. You want to talk a little bit about Cherry Baby? Remind our audience here.
Cherry Baby was a pretty big national hit, and Jack Douglas produced it, and it's kind of like power. I think it kind of defines power pop, is what they called it. It was like it's produced really well. I used a 12-string guitar, actually a double neck. One of the necks had a 12-string on it, and got great harmonies. It's a great song. I have to say, I mean, I listen to it now. It's a powerful song.
Now we have a little cut of you performing that I want to play, and maybe we could speak about it. I believe it's two of your songs. We're gonna play it right now.
Okay.
Let's hear it. Richie Ranno. As Richie Ranno. Richie, I played those two songs because I heard you say in an interview once you were most proud of those two, Pull the Plug, Coliseum Rock. Is that true?
Probably so. I probably said that. That Pull the Plug version was live, right?
Yeah, it was live. Yep.
Okay, you sound a little weird on my tiny little speaker on the cell phone, but but
no, I mean it's good
yeah.
stuff. I mean heavy stuff.
Yeah. Certainly, yeah. Those two certainly Coliseum Rock was it definitely did a lot for us, and yeah, Pull the Plug. I also like Nightcrawler. That's
I mean, a lot of
album.
energy, lot of energy in those two hits.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've had a long history. Do you want to tell us any stories with your relationship with Randy Rhoads?
Oh yeah, poor Randy. Yeah. So Randy was such a great kid.
May he rest in peace.
Yeah, definitely. They're putting him in the Hall of Fame, Rock Hall of Fame. Not that the Rock Hall of Fame is worth a crap, but at least it gives him some notoriety and some people remember him.
Absolutely.
So, what happened was, it's a pretty funny thing. In 1976, right after the first album came out, I would say 2 months later, we were on a national tour with Aerosmith. And we were doing some stadiums. And in fact, we played Anaheim Stadium with Jeff Beck. Who else was on that? Leonard Skinner. But Leonard Skinner, one of the guys, got into a motorcycle accident as usual, and they had to cancel, unfortunately. But when we played, the place was completely full, about 60,000 people. And I remember at the end of the year, Billboard said it was the number one grossing concert of the year, that particular show. And the crowd went nuts for us, and we just had the greatest time of our lives that day. It was just a fun day. And so there was evidently this kid in the crowd, Randy Rhoads, right? And his girlfriend, and they just loved the band. And a couple of nights later, Capitol ran a party for us at the Santa Monica Pier. And Randy and his girlfriend came to the party, and they came up to me, and they sat with me for a really long time and just talked and Randy told me, we were his favorite band. I just knew him as Randy. I mean, I didn't know his name was Randy Rhoads at the time. And he had picked up a flyer there that said we were going to be playing at the Aquarius Theater a couple of days later, which was the filming of Don Kirshner's rock concert, the TV show. And so he said, "Oh, we'll be there." I said, "Okay, I'll see you there, kid." And the day of the show, they on the flyer it says noon, but we didn't play till 6. We were there from noon to 6 waiting to play. They just kept changing the schedule. So Randy and his girlfriend were there, and there was a little restaurant outside that you could stay outside and eat. You know, LA's got that beautiful weather, as you know, and so everything's outdoors. And so I hung out with them in between times. I would go out, like whenever they'd say, oh, we'll push back another hour, I'd go out and I'd hang out with Randy and his girlfriend and tell them we got another hour. And we just sit there. We got to know each other a lot. You know, we talked a lot. And we finally played at 6 o'clock that night. And then he came back and said, oh, that was so great. I loved it. We played 6 songs, but 3 were aired. So so then we did another gig in the area. Santa Monica Civic, he was there. Hung out with him again. 1977, we came back. Somehow he would manage to get like backstage and hang out with us. And then we didn't come back in 78. We somehow bypassed L.A. And in 79, we played the Starwood. You ever hear of that place?
No, no. Tell me about it. I have
Starwood,
1 minute left, though. They're telling me, Richie.
What's that?
I have 1 minute. They're telling me, but yeah, tell me about that place, that venue.
We played like 5 nights at the Starwood. It was the greatest place ever. It sold out every night. I didn't see Randy, but at the end of the last gig, I stood outside. I was waiting for a car, and he came over to me. He goes, Richie. And I said, oh, Randy, you been here? He goes, yeah, I was here. He goes, Quiet Riot. I said, what does that mean? He goes, that's my band. I said, oh, good luck. And that's how I later pieced together that his name was Randy Rhoads.
Amazing. Just a minute left. Quickly, you played guitar on the Tunnel of Love album by Gene Simmons, correct?
Like the solo album, yeah, I played on Tunnel of Love. That's right.
And how was that experience for you, playing with Gene Simmons?
Oh, it was great. We were best of friends back then. You know, we were no more, but but we were then. And so, yeah, we had a great time. We had a lot of fun. The whole thing came out really great. I got a platinum album on my wall, and yeah, it's very cool.
Great stuff. And what are you doing? You still playing now? You have a gig tonight, right?
Oh, I play 5 nights a week, and then Starz is we're gonna do some gigs in October. Starz and Angel on the East Coast.
Website. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They'll be on the East Coast, and the website is starzcentral.com. And Starz, of course, for those who don't know, Starz is with a Z.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Listen, it was an honor to have you.
Thank you, Brian. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Honor to have you. That was the great Richie Ranno of Starz. Until next week, happy collecting to all.